Welcome back to the Messy City podcast. I've got returning guest Butch Rigby here, otherwise known as Kansas City's George Bailey, as I've described. my longtime friend and partner in crime on Kansas City issues, downtown development issues, etc. And Butch, it's great to see you. It's good.
Oh, Kevin, it's always great to be here. Matter of fact, it's feeling like Savannah, Georgia these days.
It is. I mean, it's already in the 70s, and it was the 70s in February or something. That was crazy. So
yeah.
I know everything's blooming. All the stuff I planted last fall is looking good. So I'm happy.
I was worried that everything bloomed too early and it was going to get frozen out, but I don't think so.
I know. I think we're like straight into lake season pretty soon. So that's all right. Well, Butch, I wanted to have you in today to talk about the baseball stadium issue in particular, because it's a hot topic here locally. There is a proposal on the ballot coming up in April here in Kansas City and Jackson County to extend a sales tax, an existing sales tax that will expire in a few years to help fund a new baseball stadium for the Royals in a downtown location in the Crossroads area, and then also provide funding for the Chiefs for a series of improvements to Arrowhead. Butch and I go way back on this issue. We had a lot of fun years ago talking about the potential for downtown baseball when we were both volunteering with the Urban Society of Kansas City.
That's correct.
That's right. Shout out to all of our Urban Society buddies.
Oh, yeah. They know who they are.
And I think it's interesting. Maybe where we could start, Butch, is to kind of put things in context for what we talked about. That was probably now 20 years ago when we were getting involved in that. And
just about.
Yeah. And so that was when the Glass family owned the Royals, and downtown was coming along, but it was still a little bit more in its infancy of redeveloping. And there was a push on the part of a lot of people to try to get the Royals to consider coming downtown. We took on this crazy volunteer task of like looking at all the different sites that there were downtown and trying to get people to analyze them and put their thoughts together. That was, in retrospect, that was kind of a wild thing. And we had a couple hundred people who volunteered with us, if I remember right.
We did. And, of course you have to remember 30 years ago when I bought my first building down in what was then Film Row, 18th and Wyandotte, before the days of Crossroads, it was a ghost town. And I'm not kidding. I mean, it was literally on a Friday night, we would hold these Christmas and July parties to celebrate the history of Film Row. And we were the only thing going on down there. Now, we were begging for tenants. I had a few buildings that I bought, and I was having a challenge keeping a coffee shop tenant open. Certainly wasn't having any luck with restaurants or anything like that. That's just natural when you've had, a big daytime population in office towers in the inside the loop. But you really have, I think we had 2,500 residences downtown, which isn't enough to support really anything.
Yeah.
And, at that time, kind of spin forward a dozen years or so, and things are happening. They're announcing, the big push for not only the Power and Light, but to get H&R Block downtown, to get the Sprint Center downtown. And we held the halfway mark of the development at Screenland at my theater for a while. And, that was a time when we were all thinking, hey, there are several good options for baseball, because it meant more and more people making downtown what it used to be. 30 years before I was there, everything was downtown. Shopping was downtown. Movies were downtown. If you wanted to see a first-run picture, it was downtown. It was a destination for a reason. And that was gone. And so we saw that opportunity. And, of course, back then, like you say, there were probably 8 good sites.
Yeah.
Because, they were going to be kind of on their own and developed around them, as opposed to the new The new situation now, when we have an owner who really wants to be downtown and
Hmm.
reflects that same passion for a good, strong downtown, they're limited to a couple of sites, and they have to take into consideration all of the other ancillary effects of the Royals being down there.
Yeah.
And of course, the ancillary effects are the reason that I support a downtown stadium.
So I think uh, you're one of the people that I really would enjoy talking to about this because um, you have your interests cross many areas, and so obviously you care about the city and about the downtown and the urban core, but you also have a almost unimpeachable track record of caring about everything local, Kansas City, small businesses, and as we look at the proposal that's on the table today, and that's really been, I think, about the primary source of controversy has been that the Royals have chosen a site in the Crossroads area. It's funny, they keep calling, in the paper it keeps calling it like the East Crossroads. I think of it personally like North Crossroads, if you want to call it that. It's
Yeah, it's literally the edge of downtown, edge of
yeah,
the loop.
yeah.
The loop hopefully will be erased. But no, I mean, look, I'm in business to make money. I always have been, but I don't believe real estate is a commodity. I don't believe you just develop strip centers. I mean, there's a business doing that, but it's not what excites me. What
Hmm.
excites me is the challenge of empty buildings becoming full. I mean, when I was down in the Crossroads back in '94, my friends just couldn't understand it. They go, "It's dead down there," and I thought, well, they got to do something with Union Station. They've got to do something with that big piece of land, maybe a hotel at 17th and Central, and why
Hmm.
not? And of course, things got better. We get the Performing Arts Center, world class, and the Union Station was completely renovated. And a lot of things happened that in unison,
Hmm.
but we were always able to maintain old buildings, small tenancies. To this day, I have 14 buildings. I have 200 tenants. They're all small businesses. And those tenants range from single office tenants to small restaurants to law firms to salons. I mean,
Hmm.
63rd Street, for example, between Oak and Rock Hill was 70% vacant as a corridor in 2014. And now we're 100% occupied, and it's all small business. And small business got us through COVID.
Hmm.
Small business stayed. They're resilient. They're not making corporate decisions from afar. So, being downtown, a lot of people say, well, how could you possibly want the baseball stadium in the Crossroads?
Hmm.
And, I was initially, like everybody else, assuming the East Village was the spot. It made all the sense. You could do $2 billion worth of development. And I slowly came around to understand why the location they picked was the one they picked. And this is before they announced it. But I started thinking about the fact that the city of Kansas City is responsible for uh, tax shortfalls, sales tax shortfalls at the Power and Light District and all that development. And, that's just part of the deal. I mean, if you really look at all the ancillary revenues they get because of the effects of the Power and Light District, it's probably still a positive for the city. However, why would you try to be far enough away that people get there, park, go to a few bars around there, and leave, and create competition for yourself?
Hmm.
Where the location they picked is, for the most part, the Kansas City Star Building,
Hmm.
a newer church building that already they've outgrown, a lot of vacant ground, and then a block of buildings that, of course, um, most people would like to see them not tear those buildings down, but in any development, you will lose some buildings, and they do have to have some ancillary space for parking, for season ticket parking, for offices, a little revenue from a hotel, things to offset the cost. And so I started looking at it, and I said, it's also 2 blocks from the streetcar as opposed to
Hmm.
8 blocks.
Right.
And if we are going to grow our habit and try to get a, what we call an intermodal transportation option. That is non-car options downtown, whether it be Uber or the streetcar or other forms of transportation. We've got to encourage people to use the streetcar. We've got to encourage people to use Ubers. So it became apparent to me that the Kansas City Star building was going to do nothing. And, so I did come to support it. Now, do I support it unconditionally? No, I think there are some challenges that they must deal with and get out in front of. Parking is the number one. Security is a close second. Respect for the people who are being displaced is probably up there at a tie for number one. And, I've had some talks. I've had some opportunities to talk to the Royals and to talk to the architects. And I do genuinely believe that John Sherman wants to do the right thing. I do believe John Sherman does not want chain restaurants. He's a Kansas City guy. People treat him like he's some hedge fund billionaire out of New York who just landed in our town. No, he lives in Jackson County. He's very charitable. He and his wife are very involved in the community and always have been. And I think it's really almost unfair to characterize him just because you're mad about a baseball stadium.
Yeah.
And so I have felt that, the location is good. And I think it makes a lot more sense, especially if the funding can be extended to cover the freeway another 3 blocks, or 2 blocks, whatever the extension of the freeway cover is, because then you genuinely have a walkable community.
Yeah. I mean, I think if we just talk about the location just for a second, just that aspect, I feel like I was one of the few people that never liked the East Village site.
Yeah.
And I always felt like that site was too far from the streetcar. Kansas City is not New York. We don't have a population used to taking public transportation and walking long distances. And so my feeling was if you really wanted people to use the streetcar as an amenity to get back and forth to games, which would be a good thing for the city.
Oh, absolutely.
Because then people could populate the entire urban core. They could park it at the plaza. They could park at the riverfront, any number of places, and then hop on the streetcar and get there. And I think that would be a good thing for our city. But I've always felt like it needed to be much closer than the East Village site was. Not to mention, the East Village site is surrounded by a bunch of government buildings, which basically close at 4 or 5 o'clock. It's kind of a dead zone downtown. And then east of there, you've got a lot of just really, social service issues that are really problematic for thinking about the kind of atmosphere that you have at a ball game.
Yeah.
So I think, like, from that standpoint, I was never in love with the East Village site. So when they announced the Crossroads site, I think if I were looking at it like, if it was a blank slate, if all of that was empty today, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And because it's proximity to so many other things, proximity to Power and Light District, the ability for all those things to build off of each other, which is something we talked about years ago. Like, the virtues of an urban ballpark is it becomes like a 1 + 1 = 3 situation for entertainment and other uses. And so it seemed to me like the major issues from the site standpoint were the existing businesses that are being displaced. I didn't care about the Casey Star building at all.
Yeah,
I think it's hideous.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to see it gone. But I know not everybody agrees with me on that, but I think it's hideous. But there are all those, a number of really cool businesses that you and I have probably both been to and really enjoy in that area. And so it's kind of a question of, like, what happens to them.
I couldn't agree more. You have the displacement of those businesses is a big deal.
Yeah.
And, the Royals will have to step up, and I believe they will, and I believe they've made this indication they will step up and not only make those businesses whole, but make sure they can relocate close, if not better. They can, whether it be rent deficiencies or anything else they have to do to make sure those businesses can thrive. In a perfect world, yeah, you'd like to leave Oak Street and leave those businesses and actually encapsulate them as part of the stadium. But it's my understanding that, the new green dirt farm might be in right field,
Yeah.
and that's probably one of the tougher ones.
Sure.
The green dirt farm, they've invested incredible amount of money and a lot of time and a lot of effort, and they're getting ready to open. After it's not easy to set up a cheese making
Oh, I know.
operation.
And they're such a phenomenal business
They
too.
are such a phenomenal business. But the Royals are very well aware of that. And they
Mhm.
do have, I think they do have time under the construction schedules to relocate them and pay for all of the things they will need to do to get them back up and running again, and hopefully even better. But it's important to note that, while if you skip that block, does the stadium become as self-sufficient as it should be?
Mhm.
And remember, there's $1 billion in private money going into this project. To me, I do listen to some of the bar owners and people who have been very vocal about how opposed they are to it, and I get it. I empathize. I own. I will tell you, I own a building at 1701 McGee down on the Crossroads. It faces what will be the new baseball stadium, and we are going to be in the direct impact zone of construction. I mean,
Mhm.
all my tenants are going to have to be facing all the perils of a $1 billion project going up directly across the street.
Mhm.
I think that the Royals have already announced they have construction management plans. They intend on busing workers in from remote lots. I mean, all of these things will go a long way to help. Some people will say, oh, well, you'll make so much money because you own the building. No, the building is rented. It's always been rented. I'm not changing tenants. I just signed a 7-year lease extension, knowing the ballpark was
Mhm.
slated for that spot, with a small office tenant who's they're part of the church next door, and I give them a discounted rent and always have. And I've locked myself into a long-term deal, and I won't ever walk away from any of my tenants. I mean, you spoke earlier. I genuinely do believe in small business, and I genuinely, I know that I would never rent one of my buildings, to a national credit tenant to get double the rent and
Mhm.
kick out a local business. I'm not in the business, purely for the money.
Yeah.
I make money. I will be the first to say I've been very fortunate with my business success, but really that's due to all my small tenants. If I
Mhm.
don't remember that those are the ones that brought me here, and so when I do support the baseball stadium where it is, I do that with an absolute solid belief that it will benefit the Crossroads.
Yeah.
I think that we do have to, maybe create, permit street parking for businesses only, or maybe you hand out, scan cards for the day so it can't be baseball parking. But at the same time, identify parking structures. Don't just announce to the public, oh, we've got enough parking. We've done a
Yeah.
study. You know, I mean, I'm here from the government. I'm here to help you. I mean, we probably do need to get some very clear messaging out there that there are a lot of people in the Crossroads who do support the Royals, and but we've got to back it up with understanding the real issues people fear, and that
Yeah,
is
there's a lot of work there to do on a lot of those logistics. And I would say for anybody also curious about Butch's background, on the previous podcast that I had him on, we kind of walked through his whole story starting from the very beginning, and it's I think it's really interesting. I actually think it's inspiring for especially a lot of young people to think about a career path. So I think one of the other aspects of all this, I wanted I guess I want to come back a little bit to the small business side of things and putting your real estate hat on. And if you were advising the Royals on like how to handle the real estate side of helping those small businesses, because I would imagine most of them are, most if not all, are probably tenants. They probably don't own their buildings,
true.
so they're on a lease of some kind. So like if the Royals buy the property, the building owner gets paid, and then the business, they're like, okay, you got to move somewhere. What are the sorts of things that the Royals could do, or that you might think about from a real estate standpoint for a tenant in that situation?
Well, of course, the tenant has rights under a lease. Just because the Royals buy the building, If they are forcing or condemning the tenant out of the space, then they have a financial obligation. This is just, pure legal talk. They,
Hmm.
they have a financial obligation to make the tenant whole again. And that goes without saying. And, condemnation is not like the old days. It's not a popular thing. They do have the rights of condemnation, and you need them. But, they're very, very much skewed toward the person being purchased or bought out or put out of business. Now, with that said, if I were advising the Royals, and I think they listen to this, I think they feel similarly. If you're going to look at the budget and you're going to look at the overall scheme of how much things are going to cost, you might be able to get carpeting at a little lower cost with a lot of work and competitive bids. You might be able to get a lot of different things and, save money. This is not a place to start trying to cut costs. This is a place that you get a little more than generous for a lot of reasons. The number one, because it's the right thing to do. A small bar owner's bar is as important to her
Hmm.
as the Kansas City Royals baseball team are to the ownership
Oh,
group.
absolutely.
It's like I say about small office tenants. I pay just as much attention to a single tenant user because from the perspective of those small businesses, this is their life.
Hmm.
And they probably work just as hard as the Royals do, and the Chiefs and everybody else. And so treat them with not only fairness, but with a generous nature. Now, if any, they've got to have, it's got to be reasonable. They've got to have some, financials to back up, their business, and they've got to be paid. But, I'd say to the Royals, let's get out in front of this right now. And I also think the general public needs to see who the Royals are. I mean, right now they're working hard. I've had some interactions with them, and I have found it to be positive. I was at the Crossroads Community Association meeting, and while it was a rather, lively meeting, for the most part, we put together a community benefits agreement. Some of the things we thought were important that the Royals needed to hear about: parking, public safety, architectural, integrity within the neighborhood. And, I think there's going to be a pretty good community benefits agreement announced pretty soon. There is the Community Improvement District, which is if you get 51% of your of the owners of the property around there
Hmm.
to agree to it, you combine a small sales tax and a property tax, and you start employing security guards and trash pickup and cleanup. Well, the Royals could be a big part of that.
Hmm.
And I would advise the Royals, give back more than you get. In other
Hmm.
words, you know what? You're going to participate in security on game night. Why don't you participate in a security patrol 7 nights a week? All of a sudden, the Crossroads is that much better off because the
Yeah.
Royals were there. If you're going to participate in, parking and some of the, you're going to park cars there. Well, why don't you help participate in identifying or maybe even building a little bit of parking? Some of it for the neighborhood. I believe the ballpark site also includes a rather decent sized lot on Locust. And during construction, make that open to all, of the neighbors to park in during construction. There's a lot of things they could do that would be a very small percentage of the budget that would be very helpful to the neighborhood in the long run and alleviate some of the concerns.
Yeah. How do you think about the parking question? Let's say when the stadium is done, um, and I know you and I probably think similarly about parking, but we think differently than most people think.
True.
And I think your average Kansas Cityan is obviously very used to the situation today at Sports Complex, and it's easy. It's not cheap anymore, but it's easy, and you can see the stadium and everything else. Parking in a downtown situation is really different, and there is a lot of parking downtown. There's actually a whole lot of existing parking in garages and on streets, but there's also more and more competition for that use, especially depending on the time of day that people might actually start coming to a game. So how would you think about that? How do you talk about that issue with other people?
Well, when I am talking about the issue, of course, the number one fear that comes up is, hey, on game night, I might as well shut down the record bar. I might as well shut down the Brick, or I might as well shut down my business that isn't particularly catering to baseball crowds,
Mm.
because no one's going to come down to the ballpark or down to the crossroads if they feel that, well, it's a ball game, there'll be no parking, and I'm not going to go pay $20 to park to go get a beer or listen to music. So, my first thought is we must have a restrictive street parking, program in place. And, if we need to be, we'll be a little progressive about it. At the same time, let's clearly identify on an app that you can look at on your phone, that any website you can look at that says, here are your parking garages.
Mm-hmm.
Touch the parking garage. It'll tell you how many spaces are available. Reserve a space right now. Once people feel comfortable where they like to park and where they want to be downtown, and they know where they're going to have a whole lot more, ease in going to the game. I remember when I was a kid, I went to this will tell you how old I am. I went to the Kansas City A's game at Municipal, and my dad knew just the right guy to park in his lawn for 25 cents, and we did it every game. But I mean, that idea that you familiarize the general public. There's going to be a lot of our population that just is really going to be resistive to going down to a ball game. But then there's a whole new generation. They're just used to it. They go down there. And I think the job will be to clearly identify that available parking, to clearly put it on a map, let people see it. We're from Missouri. Show me,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also worth noting that when we built the Sprint Center, we didn't build any new dedicated parking for that either.
Correct.
And by all accounts, that hasn't hurt the Sprint Center at all.
No. And I think that, for the Royals, it's looking at the perspective of the businesses around it. I mean, when you're inside the loop, you've probably had your business there, and always parking's always been a concern. We developed the Crossroads, we as a city and all of us developers, and have lived off a rule that allowed for no off-street parking if you had 3,500 square feet or less.
Mm-hmm.
If you have historic buildings, there's no requirement for street parking, and a lot of those buildings are historic. So, that was done with the idea of more and more public transit, which you and I both support. Mm-hmm. But it also did lead to a pretty reasonable dependence upon street parking. So let's save that street parking. Let's say that in front of every building that is non-office, or maybe all the buildings, you have to get if you want to park there, it's for a business. It's sort of like during COVID, they gave part of the parking to restaurants, and they let them utilize it. Well, we do that, and you get a little ticket, and you scan it, and you put it in your, you don't have to scan it. You just put it in your, dashboard. And if an officer comes by and they check the scan and it's valid, good. Maybe the, Brick River Cider Company gives you the ticket, or maybe the hair salon, or maybe who's ever open the Brick, or maybe the music, venue does that. So, again, and a lot of those buildings will have their own parking that they rely on, but a lot of them don't. I have a parking lot at 17th and Oak, and I will only utilize that for my tenants. And I've had a couple of small businesses request, would I rent them some nighttime parking? The answer is yes, I would. Before I need baseball parking revenues, I'd rather have, a small restaurant that knows he'll stay in business, because that parking lot will be off limits for baseball. And I think there are other landlords that will make those designations, and then we can really cull out how many available baseball spots we have. And it is a lot.
Yeah. And another aspect of this, which, why to me, the location as close to the streetcar as you could get a stadium was important, was it completely extends the range and location at which somebody might park if they're driving in, say, from Johnson County, or if you're driving in from north of the river or whatever. By the time a new stadium would open downtown, you would have the streetcar would be open from the river to UMKC. And so you could effectively come anywhere into that part of the city. And I know some people may hate hearing this too, because they don't like that idea, but you could drive into, let's say, the Westport area, and you could get a drink before the game at Westport, and then hop on the streetcar and take it to the game.
Oh, yeah.
And you could
Yeah.
do you could go to the plaza. You could go to anywhere up and down Main Street or in that corridor in Midtown. So the idea that all of the parking has to be like right near the stadium, even for commuters, is different in this situation.
No, and it is. And, maybe there's a deal made with UMKC to utilize that large
Yeah.
garage on game nights. Maybe there's and I think it's a great example. People talk about, well, is it really going to pay? Should we be supporting the Royals? Well, there's 81 games a year, and you're talking about now, instead of going to the ballpark, pulling in the lot, seeing the game, and leaving, you may well be getting off work and getting some dinner. You will have the easy ability in our town to go to Ragazza or go to
Mm-hmm.
El Centro or go to one of the restaurants up and down the streetcar line. Have an early dinner, have a couple of drinks, get on the streetcar, go to the game, come out of the game, and again, getting back on the streetcar. Especially if you're walkable from the streetcar, which is a small percentage but a nice
Mm-hmm.
percentage. you know, you don't have to worry about the car. And so, we'll learn that. I mean, I've often said, don't force people on the streetcar, encourage them, excite them about it. And quite frankly, our streetcar has been phenomenally
Yeah.
successful.
Yeah.
And making it free, I think, was the key to
Yeah.
success. So, yeah, I mean, we do need to, understand in the big picture, if nothing else, the crossroads wasn't truly successful for coffee shops and restaurants and things like that until we had enough people living downtown who were there all the time and who were there at night and who were not just driving in. And that happened because of the Power and Light and because of Sprint and because of all the energy that was created. And the baseball stadium will do more of the same. More people will live downtown. I believe we have 32,000 people living downtown right now, and I wouldn't be surprised to see 42,000 people downtown in 5 years, 6
Mm-hmm.
years, especially with the baseball stadium there. And then if you really think about, how many cars do you need? Does anybody know? Well, 9,000 for a 34,000 seat stadium. 1,500 will already be included in the ballpark project. So you've got 7,500 spaces that you're really looking at, and about 3,500 of those will be in the crossroads.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you start dividing these up, and then you look at the intermodal transportations again. You look at the streetcar, you look at Uber, you look at those things, and you got to only believe that number will grow. I
Right.
mean,
Right.
so
Yeah. Yeah. We talked about this or joked about it with my wife, who
yes,
it's funny how basically everybody our age and younger, when they are going out these days for entertainment, they're taking Uber. You know,
absolutely,
there are very few people that are driving around. The people my age and older tend
yeah,
to still be driving, no
yeah,
matter what they're doing. They're going
yeah.
to hit a couple of bars. They're going to party hop or whatever it is. They're probably still driving, but the younger crowd is much more used to just using Uber instead. It's interesting. I've probably like you. I mean, I've got a million really fond memories of Kauffman Stadium, and I started going there in the '70s when I was like a little kid, and when the great run that we had at the teams in the late '70s, and the stadium it's a better stadium now than it was then with the improvements they made 20 years ago. So I've always, I mean, I have tons of great memories, but I've traveled enough to know and been around to enough cities to know that it's a terrible location for a baseball stadium,
Yeah.
where it is now. And we can all argue and debate about maybe what the best or ideal location is, but there's just no question that baseball exists so much better when it's part of a neighborhood. And it can feed off of other activities and be mutually supportive.
I think you just said the magic word, neighborhood, because I have heard John Sherman quoted as saying, "I want to build America's next neighborhood ballpark." I mean, I remember going to Boston because I wanted to see
Yeah.
the Red Sox play at Fenway,
Mm-hmm.
and I got off the subway and this whatever transportation we were on. I'm walking around looking for the ballpark, and I keep looking around. Then I looked up and I go, oh, this is the ballpark. It blended right in, and
Yeah.
you see these, like Wrigley Field. You see the excitement of people
Hmm.
all around you walking into the ballpark, and you can see the buildings across the way, and you can see, the noise of a city, and
Yeah.
it's a neighborhood attraction, and it's a large one, but
Right.
it looks a whole lot better than an empty glass building and a big flat parking lot.
Yeah.
Let's face it.
Yeah. Yeah. No doubt. Yeah, and there's just something a little bit more, almost just magical about the experience of being in a city, uh, coming up to a game, and the excitement that happens with that. I'm not saying that there wasn't any of that at Coffin Stadium. There was too,
Oh yeah.
but it's a completely different feeling to it. And I don't remember going to Municipal Stadium back in the day. I probably did when I was like a little kid,
Yeah, I
but
went the Huddle Club for the Chiefs.
yeah,
For $1, you sit on the grassy hill at the ballpark. Those days are probably over. The $1 ticket, but
yeah,
but yeah, and probably the single most important reason to have the ballpark downtown and where it is because instead of all of the money being captured by Jackson County in the island known as the sports complex,
hmm,
it is now being spread out amongst small businesses. And instead of game time, being limited to the time it takes to park and the time it takes to get out, game time can be right after work, and you don't have to go anywhere if you're downtown or whatever restaurant you like to eat at along the way. And the truth is, as long as we can preserve the integrity of the Crossroads neighborhood, it can only be a win for the neighborhood. And there are a lot. I've spoken to a lot of people in the Crossroads who believe the same way, but all of us believe that there are good things that could come out of this as long as the Royals will be, as they would say, team players, which I
yeah.
believe they are.
Well, and I totally get and empathize with all of the people in the Crossroads who care so deeply about that neighborhood. I mean, what you and others, many others, have done over the last 3 decades or so is fantastic, and taken something, an area that was very quiet to say the least,
Yeah,
and it's really it's really our best neighborhood in a lot of ways in the urban core now. It's so lively and interesting and fun, and there's a great diversity of things going on all the time. And it's continuing to grow and change and expand, which is fantastic to see. So I totally get the the feeling that people have of being protective of that. And there are a lot of unique, creative businesses in the area. So I really hope the Royals, if they're successful with the ballot initiative, can find the right balance uh, to keep people happy and enhance the neighborhood and really do something for the businesses that are there and make them feel valued.
yeah,
Because it is a special thing that we've done in Kansas City,
hmm
and I love to see it.
yep, me
Um,
too. I think it can be a win-win, and I would hope that again, I come here as a 30-year resident, so to speak, or
mhm.
business resident of the Crossroads, and care deeply about it, and
Yeah,
very much, and I I think it's only a positive as long as it's done correctly.
yeah. But I don't care about that KC Star printing press building at
No,
all.
no, I heard somebody at the Jackson County meeting the other day go, "Can you imagine you walking in this big, beautiful neighborhood and there's this giant, big box, big stadium there?" And
Yeah.
and of course, I didn't say it, but I was thinking, are you colorblind to the color green? Because that monolith is, I mean, I always thought it was kind of cool, but I don't know what the use could possibly be. I've heard museum, but boy,
Yeah, I don't know.
that would
I
be a
don't know.
big museum. We have
Yeah.
a lot of museums in
Yeah.
this town.
No doubt. And oh, by the way, the Star got tax abatement for that building.
Yes, and the church
Twice,
doesn't
right?
pay. Yeah, they
Twice.
got it twice. The
Yeah.
church doesn't pay tax. So, and another thing is we have all that ground in the East Village that could be used for additional parking,
Yeah.
And I think they could come up with a clever tram system to get people right over to the park if they didn't want to walk. And B, the church could be moved over there, I would hope.
Mm-hmm.
They're a strong presence down there. I've heard all the arguments. Oh, there's $31 million worth of real estate not being taxed. I go, well, it wasn't really being taxed too much anyway.
Yeah. And, if you go back to I remember the original vision for why we call it East Village anyway, which was, the idea was the property owners and others were going to come together there and build a really cool neighborhood and
Yeah.
build an urban neighborhood. And that opportunity is still there. And that actually would still be an ideal solution for moving ahead with that
Oh,
part of
yeah.
downtown.
Yeah.
And we can use the people, we can use the development. It'd be a great place for just another wonderful urban neighborhood.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
And more people living downtown, and they'll
mhm.
be convenient to services and, things like this.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, Butch, as we wrap it up here, do you have any other final thoughts or comments? Is anything we didn't cover? Something I didn't ask?
No, I mean, I think my final thought is, for those people out in the audience today who are still very skeptical or very concerned, with good reason, I'd say really, look at some of the solutions and look at some of the other downtown baseball stadiums and how they have been very successful for the area around it, and reach out, talk, ask the Royals, make those questions public. Not why are you doing it, but how can we make this work for all of us? And I believe if you really take the time to look at it, there are good solutions, and then only better prospects for small businesses in the neighborhood.
Butch, one of the things I've always loved about you, you're such a positive guy, and
Well,
you've always got like a positive outlook on whatever's going on, and I really appreciate that. I think that's great. I think that's
thank you.
well said.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me. Again, this is the Messy City Podcast. If you're new to the podcast, we talk a lot about city planning, design, development issues, not just in Kansas City, but all over the country. And I hope you will hit that like or follow button and stay tuned, and drop me a line as well. Thanks very much for listening. Take care.